Well, I know folks are still coming into the Zoom room, but we're going to go ahead and get started this afternoon. Happy Thursday, everyone. I know the days start to run together a little bit in these times, but we're glad to have you with us this afternoon as we kick off our third session of our virtual professional learning series, and excited to build off of our conversation from Tuesday, where we spent a little bit of time talking about unfinished learning in mathematics. So Tuesday's webinar, in addition to the slides and the tools and the templates, are posted at the link, and I think we'll get that in the chat box for you as well. Shout out to our communications team for getting them up on the website so quickly, and also to School Kit's team as well. Like I mentioned last time, our goal will be to have everything posted before the next webinar. So there is a holiday coming up on Monday, so we'll see if we can maybe get things turned around and posted by tomorrow. I invite you to continue the conversation. If you are on Twitter, you're welcome to tweet at me, NDE_TLA, or you can also tweet at the School Kit group, and then we're using the hashtag Launch Nebraska. Just a reminder, I mentioned this is session 3 within a series of 10 different webinars between now and the middle of June. And again, our goal is to provide clear and actionable information and tools and resources that you can utilize as part of your continuity of learning plans. And just spending some time up front talking about summer learning, and then we'll be able to also begin focusing on making plans for the next school year. Like our previous webinars, we are partnering with School Kit to deliver this professional learning series, and excited to have Brian back with us today to talk a little bit more about some resources for mathematics. So I'm going to kick it over to Brian.
Thanks a lot, Corey. Just a quick reminder for any of you that didn't join us this past Tuesday, who I am. I'm the Director of Math here at School Kit. I've supported schools in a number of ways throughout my career, and I'm based here in Denver, Colorado. And there's a picture of probably the favorite reason most people have when they meet me, my dog Bentley there, just in case you wanted to see him again. Let's get started with some session norms before we dive into our content. Again, the Q&A feature is available for you. If you have any questions about technology or logistics, or you run into any issues with any of our links, just drop that into the Q&A box, and we have some people standing by who can support you with that. Additionally, we'll be looking at some resources and directing you to a couple different materials throughout today's session. To best view those, we recommend that you exit full screen so that you can view those in your web browser, as well as continue to see the screen here on our webinar. Also, as Corey mentioned, recorded sessions and this PowerPoint deck will be made available at the Launch Nebraska site. So make sure that you check that out so that you can follow up, go back and see anything that you might have missed, or get additional information that didn't make it into your notes. One last feature that we'll be engaging with a little bit today is the chat function. You'll be prompted throughout today's webinar to use that a couple different times during whole group share out. Just make sure that you have chat all panelists selected so that we can see what it is that you're sharing. So with that, why don't we dive into our content for today? The session focus for today is really around digging deeper into the program design and summer implementation strategy for Zearn Math. Let's take a moment just to review the session agenda. So as you can see here, we're going to start off by talking about the concept of summer learning recovery. And then we have some people from Zearn here. Ashley is going to walk us through their program and give some more information about Zearn as a curriculum as a whole. And then we'll step back from that and talk about planning for the summer and talk next steps to close out. So let's get started with our summer learning recovery. When we met together on Tuesday, we learned about 2 different schools and their approach to supporting students with fall reentry. We're going to look back at them really briefly. First, we met Cowan Elementary and their misaligned approach to addressing unfinished learning for Tanya and her classmates. We then saw an aligned approach at Greenbrier School, where they made strategic connections between missed and unfinished learning this spring and the new learning in this upcoming school year. Damien and his fourth grade classmates would be better prepared for fourth grade by the end of the year as a result of Greenbrier's approach. Now, we also discussed how Greenbrier Elementary implemented summer learning recovery. We mentioned it really briefly on Tuesday and said we'd focus on it more today. We're going to spend some time today looking at what Greenbrier School District did to make summer learning recovery come to life. To do this, we're going to take the next 5 minutes to read the Greenbrier case study, and you can access that with the tiny URL listed here on the screen, and Anders just dropped it into the chat box for you so that you can also access it through there. Take the next 5 minutes to access the study, read through it, and reflect on these 2 questions. First, how does Greenbrier's plan support equitable access for students? Second, which part of their plan might be most important for your school or school system to consider? Take 5 minutes to do this. I'll let you know when we have about 1 minute remaining. Take about 1 more minute to finish reading through the case study and reflecting on these 2 questions. If you're finished already, you can go ahead and start to type your responses to that first question into the chat box so you're ready when we move on to the next piece and ask you to share your thoughts. All right. And so we are going to step out and debrief that first question to start. And if you haven't started already, I see a number of people are dropping their ideas into the chat box. Go ahead and drop into the chat box under all panelists your responses and reflections on how their plan supported equitable access for all students. I'll share them out as I see them coming through. So Anne is telling us that they ensured one-to-one devices, providing hotspots around the district with webinars and ongoing communication. Tracy mentions that they provided the opportunity for all students to get access. Michelle is sharing as well. They had access to technology for all students and made sure to have enough staff to support students in their learning. I'm seeing a lot here about access to the technology, access to internet. Yeah, I see Lisa mentioning that they're going to get access to a device at some point during the summer. So while they may not have enough for everyone to get them all at once, they're going to have a chance during one of their 2 loan opportunities. Jen mentions they also planned to use the first 2 weeks of school for those who did not have a chance to get access or weren't able to do the work. Tracy brings in communication, that it's part of the equitable learning is making sure everyone knows about it. Lenny mentions they're providing students an opportunity to build math skills during the summer. Yeah, so it seems like a lot of ideas are coming out around these key concepts that we're going to look at here in just a moment. Now, this second question, I'm going to ask you to hold your reflections on. We'll come back later in the session after you've had a chance to get to know a little bit more about Zearn, about their summer learning program, and what all of that means, to reflect back on this case study and what it might mean for you in your school or school system. So when we look at what Greenbrier School District did, many of you brought out some of the key things we identified here as well. First, I do want to name, they recognized that Zearn had done the work for them around determining the critical content to be prepared for the next year's learning in school. They weren't starting from ground zero, they were utilizing a resource that had already been created. They also considered 3 key things: access, staffing, and communication. And we're going to spend some time today talking about what considerations you might think about in those 3 areas, but a couple things I do want to point out from it. They had access for vulnerable students, a really important thing. They also identified teacher support to ensure that students weren't working on a computer program alone without any help if they ran into trouble. They also developed an incentive program. This is something I would recommend you consider if it aligns to your values and the way in which your school or your school program functions. If it doesn't, I know I once was principal of a school where that wouldn't have been a part of our community. That's not the direction we would go. But I've also led in other schools where that was a part of our community, and it would support students and partner with local businesses to help them get back on their feet. Ultimately, what we see here is that students will be better prepared for fall reentry as a result of the work they did over the summer. So let's move into the second part of our agenda for today and talk about the Zearn Summer Learning Recovery Plan and what that might look like for you and your school system to use. A quick overview here of that program before I hand things over to Ashley. This program was designed by Zearn to help administrators build summer programs to recover learning loss caused by school closures. It also focuses, as we mentioned in the case study, on the critical work of each grade that will help prepare students for next year's instruction. With that, I'm going to pass things over to Ashley so she can share some more information about the program itself and Zearn as a whole.
Brian, and thank you all for joining today. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share Zearn Math and our approach to summer learning with you all. Before I dive in, I want to start with just a quick introduction to who we are at Zearn as a company. We are a nonprofit, and our mission is to ultimately create the highest quality instructional resources to support all kids in learning and loving math. So hopefully you'll see that big idea come out as we go. For those of you who have already started to explore our website, you might have noticed that Zearn offers a full range of instructional resources that can be used for everything from core math instruction, intervention, and now learning recovery. For purposes of today, we're going to focus on using Zearn's digital instructional resources for summer learning. So this is focused on the student-facing personalized digital lessons and the teacher-facing real-time reports. In addition to these resources, we do also offer teacher resources for hands-on instruction, including materials for small group, lesson and unit level assessments, and on-demand professional development resources that are designed to be used for unit planning throughout the year. Again, for purposes of time and focus, we're going to zero in on the summer learning recovery using the digital resources, but please do keep in mind that combinations of these resources also support a broader approach to learning recovery throughout the school year, as well as using Zearn more holistically for core math instruction. With that in mind, let's dive into a little bit more about Zearn's digital resources for summer learning. So Zearn Math offers a digital lesson for every day of instruction that provides a balance of fluency, application, and conceptual understanding. Each lesson is designed for independent learning, including on-camera teachers, interactive manipulatives, and in-the-moment feedback and remediation on individual areas of misconception or struggle. Information from the digital lessons is summarized for teachers, so they have a clear picture of what content students have completed and where individual students struggle. What we're going to do today is we're actually going to dive in and get a really tangible look at what those materials are for students and what the resources are for teachers. And then we'll connect that back to how those resources can be used for summer learning. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the structure of a digital lesson, and then we'll experience a few examples together. So each digital lesson in grades 1 to 5 has 4 parts. Students begin each lesson with a 2-part fluency warm-up, including number gym and a grade level lesson aligned fluency. Then they move on to guided practice, where they're going to learn and connect new concepts. This is basically a digital version of a daily concept development. Finally, students complete an independent practice activity or a digital exit ticket, where they have to show understanding before they can unlock the next lesson. With that, let me log in and let's actually experience some of these digital activities together as a student would. We're going to dig into lesson 6 from grade 3, unit 1, or as what we call a unit, a mission, which is focused on connecting the idea of equal groups to multiplication and division with friendly numbers. So as we just saw in that last slide, the first activity of the digital lesson is number gym. This is an individually adaptive fluency experience designed to target foundational number sense concepts. We built Number Gym based on a very large data set of millions of lessons completed, where we noticed many students struggle with K2 number sense skills, even in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So this activity is specifically designed as an on-ramp to support students in accessing grade level content by ensuring those critical number sense skills are strong. There are a lot of different types of Number Gym activities, and you'll hear that throughout as we look at different types of activities, and it's all designed to keep it interesting and engaging for students. This one here is Addition Magician, and it's designed to support students in developing sophisticated decomposition strategies to add fluently. So I get into this first problem. In this example, the problem is 8 plus 3, and I'm being asked to break down 3 to find 8's partner to 10. I begin by working with my number bond while being supported with my concrete 10 frame down below. You'll notice as I struggle, I'm going to get support to guide me to the, let me try again one more time. So you'll notice I'm going to continue to get that support. Now I'm guided to the right answer, which is then going to help me work through my number bond. My equation is going to be rearranged because 10 plus 1 is easier to solve than 8 plus 3. And then I'll go back and solve my original equation as well. If I continue to struggle, I'll stick with more basic concepts and scaffolded support. And as I show understanding, the 10 frame will be gradually taken away, and I would move on to more complicated numbers and concepts. So again, a short opening activity just to make sure those number sense skills are strong and that students have those core foundations to support with grade level work. The second activity of every digital lesson is the lesson aligned grade level fluency. As with all of our digital components, again, there are many different types of these fluency activities to keep it exciting for kids. Some of the fluency activities are designed to support students in building automaticity with previously learned concepts, while others act as more of an on-ramp to upcoming content. So this is a sprint here. Let me get in here. And you'll notice as I dive into this sprint, students are going to work through an intentional progression to practice their facts with the number families. So let me work through a couple problems here. You'll notice as I work through these facts, I'm not stopped if I get the answer right or wrong. I've gotten a number in a row correct. You notice if I get a couple wrong, I'm going to keep working, and I'll show you why in a moment. You'll notice there is a subtle timer up top. It's just to time box the fluency activity, not to create anxiety. This first round lasts about 60 seconds, and you'll see what happens if I stop engaging with the activity for a little while. It's going to prompt me to keep going, so with another opportunity just to make sure students are staying engaged and productive. Again, my time will run out. I'm going to work through a few more while I'm waiting for my timer. The value of this fluency activity here is that it provides real-time feedback both for students and for teachers. So for a student, as soon as my first round ends, I'm immediately going to check my own work. Again, there's that engagement popping up. So right as my sprint finishes, I will go in and I'll check my own work. So I'm getting, you'll notice as I work through here, as I get a number in a row correct, I get a little celebration. If I get to one where I struggle, I always get the chance to try again, or I get that celebration again. If I continue to struggle, I'll be shown the right answer so I can learn from a mistake and hopefully correct that in the second round. Once I work through here, I'll see how many I did correct and I'll start my second round. We'll skip the second round for today just for sake of time, but I just wanted to highlight that real-time feedback for students. Keep in mind that not only do students receive that in the moment feedback, teachers are also receiving real-time actionable data on students who are struggling with fluency in one of the class reports, which I'll show you in just a moment. So now we've completed our two short fluency warm-ups, and we're jumping into the heart of the digital lesson. This is the guided practice, and this is where students are engaging with instruction that feels most similar to a daily concept development.
Hey there, mathematician. Let's get started with the word problem. Read this problem and imagine what's happening.
So this activity is called a math chat. It's designed to resemble a small group setting where students learn with an on-camera teacher. As students engage with guided practice, they're going to complete checkpoints like this one, which give them the opportunity to build and construct their math in a variety of ways and receive feedback and support if they need it. So in this first checkpoint, I'm breaking down the problem, identifying the known and unknown information. So here I know the total number of fish, and I know the number of fish in each tank, but I do not know the number of tanks. I'm going to do that numerically as well. I know there are 20 total fish and 5 fish in each tank. You'll notice I do have the option to have the question prompt read out loud using this audio button here.
Fill in the information we already know.
And I'll keep going.
Kayla?
We know there are 20 total fish, and 5 fish can fit in each tank. We're trying to find out how many tanks they'll need for all 20 fish.
You got it. Here is one tank. Let's start by putting 5 fish in this tank. Keep going. Put 5 fish in each tank until all fish are in a tank.
So during these digital lessons, students are going to visualize problems with animations like these fish and construct their own visual models using interactive digital manipulatives. For this problem as a student, I would build another tank and I would put 5 fish in it. And I would build another tank and put 5 fish in it, and I would continue building my tanks until all fish are in a tank. This is designed to create an opportunity for students to explore new concepts with concrete work so that they can understand the concepts in an intuitive way.
I'll put 5 fish in each tank like this. Let's write a multiplication equation that represents our picture. I'll write a question mark for our unknown, the number of groups. What is the size of each group? What is the total? Go ahead. Fill in the multiplication equation.
So in this third checkpoint, students move to representing the known parts of the problem in a multiplication equation. So here I know there are 5 fish in each tank and 20 total fish.
The number of groups is our unknown. There are 5 fish in each tank, or group, and 20 total fish. Now, write a division sentence to match this picture. Use your multiplication equation to help. What's the total? And how many fish are in each group?
So at this next checkpoint, we would write a division equation to match the picture, but let me pause here for a moment and point out a few things. So first, all of these blue circles here represent a checkpoint where students will stop and engage with the activity. So just as teachers do in their instruction, the digital lesson stops often, every 10 or 15 seconds, to check for understanding and provide support and remediation if necessary. All checkpoints are structured in the same way. Students are going to work through the math, get supportive feedback if they need it, and then hear and see the solution modeled in the video. As students continue to work through the digital lesson, they will engage with the math in a variety of ways. In addition to the digital representations we've already started to see in the first few checkpoints, the lesson will also prompt students to transfer their learning to paper using student notes. Let's take a look at one of these checkpoints. Note that I'm able to skip ahead in this digital lesson because I'm in a teacher account, but students cannot do this. They must engage with each checkpoint.
This next problem in your notes. Today, we're working on Mission 1, Lesson 6. Ethan puts away 15 books for literacy class. There are 3 shelves, and he puts the same number of books on each shelf. Draw an array that represents this problem. Use a circle to represent each book.
So this time we're prompted to solve this problem in our notes. So here's what the prompt looks like on the computer, and here's what it looks like on paper. So you'll notice it's virtually identical to make it easy for students to transfer between the two formats. The purpose of this checkpoint is to give students a chance to draw their math and represent their thinking in a variety of ways, while also supporting transfer and retention. After students work through this problem in their notes, for example here where students are prompted to draw an array to solve, students will then keep working through the digital activity where they'll be prompted to check and revise their own work. Let's take a look at one more problem, and I'm going to jump forward a little bit more, and I want to show you how some of the remediation comes into play. So let me jump forward, and this time we're going to look at a problem with an array.
Ready for one more? Kayla decorated her notebook with stickers. She arranged 21 stickers into rows of 3. Create an array to represent the problem. Remember, there are 3 stickers in each row.
So here again, I'm working with the digital manipulative that helps visualize the problem, this time pictorially, as I work with an array to represent rows of stickers. You'll notice that I'm receiving a little less scaffolding than I did in the first problem. Let's say I struggle. I'm going to get that feedback, and I always get a chance to try again. If I continue to struggle, you notice I'm going to receive scaffolded support to help break down the problem, helping me first think about what one row of 3 stickers looks like, and then providing support with how my array should look. Keep in mind that I'm only getting this additional remediation and scaffolding because I struggled in that first question. Another student who constructed their array successfully would not receive these additional support questions and instead would move right along to the next set of questions where I would relate my array to multiplication and division equations. So while all students are grounded in the same high quality instructional experience, each student is going to have a different experience that is adaptive to their individual areas of struggle. Build my array here. One thing I want to point out, I showed you what the remediation path looked like in this one checkpoint, but keep in mind that this is something that happens throughout all checkpoints. So throughout all of this experience, at every checkpoint, there's opportunities for more scaffolded support, for remediation, for foundational content. So again, students are going to receive foundational support and remediation as they work through the guided practice, as they struggle in each of the checkpoints. So it's important to note that foundational content is really embedded throughout the experience to make the math accessible for all kids. So for sake of time, I'm not going to work through the rest of this activity. I'm going to jump into the last activity of the digital lesson, which is called the Tower of Power. This is essentially a digital exit ticket where you can think about it like a daily lesson level diagnostic. So during this application work, students are going to demonstrate their understanding and receive precise feedback and remediation if they struggle, just as they did in the guided practice. So in this Tower of Power, we're going to answer questions aligned to the guided practice. In this first question, which acts as a bit of a review, I'm being asked to identify the number of equal groups. So in this problem, it is 5 equal groups of 4 cakes, and then I'm going to relate that to a division equation. Again, just a quick review question. One thing you might have noticed is how my tracker over here on the right filled up as I answered those first 2 questions correctly. So towers are structured in stages. This lesson you can see has 4 stages. And I just completed the first stage, so now I'm moving on to the second stage. In this question, students are using a manipulative like the one they used in the math chat to model the problem. So here I'm being asked to divide the goldfish into equal groups, but without an example for support that I had in the math chat. So let's make a mistake to see what happens. You'll see I'm going to get that feedback in a moment. I always get a chance to try again. If I start to zero in, you'll notice my feedback becomes more precise. I'm getting part of the problem correct, but not all of it. And at this point, I'm going to go into what's called a boost. Boosts are remediation paths that are written to break down questions and scaffold understanding for students right when they struggle. So in this boost, I'm invited to break down the question, first identifying the information I know from the problem, the number of fish in each tank, and then I'm going to rebuild the tanks with an example for support, just as I did in guided practice. Have a lot of tanks in this problem. So once I complete the boost like I did here, I'm going to re-enter the tower. And I'm going to work through another problem. You'll notice I have a different problem this time. So every time I go back into the tower after working through remediation, I'm going to get a new set of numbers and questions so I can really show true understanding of the tower. If I continue to work this tower, I'd use my fish tanks to create those equal groups. I'd relate that to multiplication and division as we saw in the guided practice. And then the third and fourth stage, again, just as I did in the guided practice, I'd move on to using an array. I'm going to pause the digital lesson here and shift gears to seeing how this experience as a student translates up to real-time teacher reporting. I noticed there are a couple questions come in. I'm going to hold off on jumping into those until I walk through the last part around teacher reports, and then I'll take a look at some of the questions that might have come in. So again, let's take a look at how the data from the digital lesson translates into real-time insights on student productivity and struggle available to teachers in their class reports. So you'll notice that I'm in Zearn and I've logged in and I'm in the report section and I'm under the class reports for a teacher. There are 4 types of reports for teachers to use on student progress and struggle. 2 on student progress called progress and pace, and 2 on student struggle, 1 for the tower alerts and 1 on fluency. So this first report here is the progress report. This report shows you where each student is working in the digital sequence and how much of the unit students have completed. Each one of these bars represents a unit, and the shaded pink portion represents how much of that unit a student has completed digitally. You can click into any of these specific sections to see what lessons students have completed. The circle indicates they completed a lesson, and the star indicates they completed a bonus. So there is an opportunity for a lesson level enrichment after every lesson, which is in the form of a bonus question. You can also click on any of these columns to sort students by where they're assigned. And you can click into the assignment to see exactly what content students have completed by activity. The second report that is similar in nature, but with a little bit of a different format, is the PACE report. This report helps keep students on track to complete their weekly digital lesson goals. So this top chart is designed to be a visual summary of how the class is progressing towards lesson completion goals over the last 4 weeks. And by scrolling down, you can see this same data in a real-time student level view. And again, we're looking at number of lessons completed. I can see this over the last 4 weeks. I can again click on any of these column headers to zero in on students who may be moving more slowly or falling behind. I can click into a specific cell to see exactly what lessons students completed and when, and how long they've spent on Zearn. And I also have information around last login, so I can see whether students are continuing to log into the program. In addition to the PACE and progress reports, there are also 2 reports on student struggle, tower alerts and sprint alerts. Both reports look very similar, so I'm going to focus on the tower alerts. The sprint alerts is the same idea, but for fluency. Again, as we just saw, the tower of power is what students do at the end of a digital lesson to show understanding of the lesson's objective. With the same idea in mind, the tower alert report is designed to highlight when a student is struggling in the digital exit ticket or that last activity, or in a specific lesson. So as we just saw, when we struggled as a student, we got that precise feedback and support in the moment. While that's happening, teachers also receive a real-time alert called the tower alert. An alert looks like this. Each alert is specific to a student and to a lesson. You can see information about when and how often the student struggled in that lesson, and whether the student was able to complete the tower by working through the boost. So for example here, you can see that Porter has struggled twice on Wednesday and has yet to complete the lesson. And that's indicated by those 2 exclamation points. However, another student down here, Jesse, struggled in a different lesson worked through the remediation, and was able to complete the lesson successfully the next day. So in addition for looking for students who are stuck and struggling, this report also provides an opportunity to look out and celebrate moments where students have productively struggled and persevered. There are a number of ways that you can filter and sort this data to make it easy to use. So you can click on Hide Completed to zero in on just students who are struggling and may need additional support. I can also filter this by date, by number of struggles, by specific student to see all of the time an individual student has struggled, and by content, even down to lesson level. So I can see the exact set of students who struggled in a given lesson. Again, as I mentioned, the second type of report for struggle is on fluency. So it's the same format with alerts for students who are struggling. And I can filter this in similar ways. So this is just giving me an indication that students struggled in a fluency activity. So let me pause the digital resources here and come back to what this means for summer planning. And actually, before I do that, let me take a look at some of the questions that are coming in because I see a number of good questions. So first, what grades does Zearn apply for? So Zearn is K-5. We are introducing 6th grade for the upcoming school year, and that will be available within the month. So that is something that can be included as you're thinking about summer. So it is K-5 with 6th grade being added soon. So if you went to our website, you'd see up to 5th grade for now, but again, 6th grade is right around the corner. And then we will be expanding to K-8 by not this upcoming school year, but the following one. So again, K-5 right now, K-6 for the upcoming school year, and K-8 for the 21-22 school year. Then there was a couple great questions on assignment. So do we decide what lessons to give them, or is there a test to determine where students should be placed? All great questions. For summer in particular, we are and will, and I'll show you where you can see this, we make recommendations on the specific content that students can be completing that is based on the critical content from the prior year that was likely disrupted due to school closures. Again, this is the content that is critical for the grade they just and is critical for success in future grades. So again, we've done the work, as Brian mentioned, to identify the specific 30 or 40 lessons in each grade that we would recommend students work on over the course of summer. You would assign students to those lessons. So again, we make the recommendations on the specific areas. In most cases, they are groups of lessons. So we'll say assign students to the first lesson of this area. They'd work through a number of lessons, and then there might be a time when we actually just assign them to the next set of lessons. But generally, they're working through chunks of lesson in a specific area. So you would assign those students to those lessons and have them work through. That said, you do have the flexibility, or teachers have the flexibility to place students on assignments throughout the grade level, or actually through any of the content in K-5. So again, there is the option to set students to an assignment. We do make clear guidance on exactly what assignment that should be for the purposes of summer. Before I jump off of the Q&A tab, any other questions on Zearn, the digital resources for students, or the teacher reports? If not, I'm going to jump in and just kind of talk about a couple ideas with thinking about what this means for summer planning and some resources that we can share to help you guys all get started with your own planning. I see a couple chats coming in as well, so let me take a look there. Just make sure I'm getting everything. Great, okay, a couple more questions. So in case I didn't, grades for summer recovery, K through 6, so there are recommendations for K through 6 for summer recovery. And how does training for staff work? So that is a great question. I'm going to punt that question for a moment. I'm going to come back to that as we think about kind of next steps as you're thinking about planning for summer. So I'm going to come back to the question on training. Any other questions here? Oh, a couple more came in. Okay. Correct. There's not a diagnostic test built into Zearn. That said, there is a daily diagnostic that students are doing every day at the lesson level, and that is our approach in general. So our approach is focused on supporting students with critical content based on what we know they need for the grade level they just completed and what we know they need for upcoming grades. And then we're diagnosing at the lesson level so that as teachers see students struggling, they can intervene and provide additional support. Again, keep in mind the digital lesson is also intervening as students are struggling. So as they're working through the content and struggling, they will get that remediation, but we're also sharing that information with teachers. So if there are additional things that teachers want to do to support their struggle, they do have that option. But we're not going to give them a diagnostic that says what content should students complete or where do students have gaps. We're focusing them on what we know is to be the critical content for them to complete between now and the end of the year. Correct. Critical contents are based on Nebraska state standards. So yes, we're basing this on what we know is critical based on your state standards. Just look through them. A couple more questions coming in. Okay, I think we got all the questions. If I missed any, please feel free to go ahead and put that back in the Q&A. I see the questions kind of moving around in here, so I just want to make sure I'm getting through all of them. I did see another chat come in, so let me just check to make sure there's not a question there. Oh, okay, some good questions on the digital lesson and how long it takes. So digital lessons take, on average, and I put a big exclamation point next to the word average, on average 30 minutes per lesson. I kind of emphasize the average point because as you saw, as we walked through the digital lesson, there are so many opportunities for students to get remediation and intervention that if one student works through that digital lesson and doesn't require any remediation or doesn't struggle throughout that digital lesson, their experience is going to be much shorter than a student who needed remediation alongside every checkpoint. So again, 30 minutes is very much an average. Some students could complete a lesson in 20 or 25 minutes and other students could take 45 minutes. So it's important that students do have the time to work independently through the digital lesson. 30 minutes is a good average to kind of base it off of. Question on classroom setup for the teachers. So teachers can set up classrooms that they put their students in. There are two types of accounts on Zearn, and I won't go into this to detail. This would be a good place where if you wanted more information, we could connect offline and share more information more specific to your district. But there are two types of ways to use Zearn. We do offer individual accounts with that educators or teachers or parents can sign up for. And in those accounts, they can sign up one classroom's worth of 35 students, and they can use that for free across all of our content. So that is something that teachers can go in, create an account, and use. And you might already have teachers who've done a little exploring of Zearn with those individual accounts. There is a max capacity for those. Typically, however, when we work with schools or districts using in a more formalized program like summer or going into fall, we usually work through them as more of a school or district partnership where we set up school licenses. They are available. They have a purchase associated with them. I can share more about that. That is where there is no max capacity on classrooms or teacher assignments, and teachers can be shared across classrooms. There's just a lot more flexibility within a school license. There's a question on kindergarten. I'm just going to do a quick look to Brian and Corey just to make sure to keep going with Q&A versus come back and regroup on questions at a later point. I just want to make sure we have enough time to wrap up and do everything we need after the Zearn portion.
Yeah, Ashley, I think we have about 2 or 3 more minutes before.
Okay, why don't I do this? I will answer this last question on kindergarten because it's a good one, and kindergarten does look different. And then I'm going to jump in and just do a couple wrap-up things because I want to make sure you guys have a sense of what's next in terms of what we'll be sharing and other information you have access to. So Zearn for kindergarten does look different. As you could probably imagine, a kindergarten student working through a 30-minute independent digital lesson is not necessarily a good fit with their developmental needs. So in kindergarten, the activities are shorter and more supplemental in nature, and they're designed to focus around early elementary number sense skills. They're very engaging. They're very fun for kindergarten students. They definitely can work through them independently. But again, they are shorter, more supplemental, and focus on number sense skills. We still do have recommendations for summer activities for kindergarten students, but those activities take closer to about 10 minutes per activity rather than the 30 minutes for a full digital lesson. Okay, with that, let me jump back in. I'm going to close a couple of the questions and chats out just so I can make sure I'm able to see. So let me just talk about a couple wrap-up things. So again, as I mentioned, we focused in on the digital resources that are a core component of a virtual summer learning recovery plan. But there are, of course, a full set of instructional resources available in Zearn that can be used both to support summer work as well as throughout the year for learning recovery and core math instruction. So first, if you'd like to dig more into Zearn for summer or for planning even for the upcoming academic year, there are 2 ways to help. So the first, we're going to send after this webinar a number of resources specifically designed to support in summer learning plans. So the first resource over here on the left is our brand new learning recovery website, which was launched yesterday. The site includes everything from detailed grade level content plans to recorded webinars to general guidance on implementing Zearn. So that's one resource that I think will be incredibly helpful. As I talked about the recommendations that we're making that Brian talked about as well, those are available in this website, and I would highly encourage spending some time digging through those recommendations. In addition to the website, we're going to send everyone a few recorded webinars that we think are going to be most helpful for summer and even fall planning. Those include an in-depth look at our approach to accessibility, an in-depth look at our approach to supporting English language learners of all levels, And finally, our approach to supporting intervention. So all of these will kind of give you a really in-depth look at how Zearn supports a range of students and a range of learning needs. The second way that we can help is by partnering together. So as I started to talk about with working with schools and districts who are school licenses, we do offer a number of services to our district partners, including implementation support and teacher training. So if you are considering using Zearn in your district, either for summer learning recovery or for the upcoming academic year, or both, a great way to get in touch with us is to reach out to this email right here, info@zearn.org. I have this email coming into my inbox at all times, so I will certainly keep an eye out for emails from you all. And what I would love to be able to do is to schedule some time to connect with the right folks on your team, answer questions, provide more information. We can share similar information for folks on your team that may not got to join today. And we can answer questions around setting up school licenses and what additional training opportunities look like. As you can probably imagine, we've had the opportunity to work with quite a few districts to get set up for remote learning and hybrid learning. So we're happy to share that, those experiences and those best practices with you all to help you do the same. Okay, with that, let me turn it back over to Brian to wrap us up.
Ashley, thank you so much. For everybody, as we transition back over to the other slide deck that we're going to finish out with today, just take a moment to think about your quick reactions to everything we just learned from Ashley about Zearn, and drop some things into the chat box. What is this making you think of? What questions are you sitting with still? What's there? That's going to help Corey and his team as they follow up and continue with next steps around this. So feel free to put in those quick reactions. Great, I'm seeing lots of thoughts and questions start to come into the chat box. As we continue forward, jumping into our last portion of the webinar today, planning for summer and next steps, feel free to continue to drop questions, thoughts, and ideas that you have into that chat box. So now that we've had a chance to learn a little bit about Zearn and their summer learning recovery program, we want to stop and think about what are some of the key considerations that Greenbrier made. And we identified those earlier. And now thinking to that second question we talked about reflecting on back when we read the case study, what do we need to consider as we engage in planning for summer learning recovery? Whether that's through Zearn, or if you are in a 612 school or using a different resource, what do you need to consider throughout this process? Think back to the ideas that you thought of when we first read the case study, and feel free to drop a couple ideas into the chat box. I'll read them out as they come through. All right, I'm seeing some ideas start to come in here. We have a couple different Marys. Marys are chatting it up right now. So first, Mary says, we have to consider students' accessibility to internet and technology. We have another Mary who mentions the examples of incentive programs, thinking about remote summer school, thinking about cost. What does this look like, and how do we engage our school community as a whole as it recovers financially? That's from Holly. Anne is mentioning that Greenbrier found a way to hire 2 teachers per grade level. Funding can always be an issue. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of other ideas come in. Keep them coming in. I'm going to walk us through a couple ideas that we thought about around each of the 3 areas of consideration that we looked at during the Greenbrier case study. First, around access. Think about how you can be creative with your current resources to provide access for students. We know that going to purchase brand new programs and everything can require a lot of resources. And we're in a time where some of our funding may be uncertain or unknown at this point about what's coming next. So think about what you currently have and how you can utilize it. Think as well about programs like Zearn that are offering free resources that can be utilized to meet this need. Also around access, think about your timing. Are you able to run two cohorts like Greenbrier did? Or with the time that you have before school begins, do you only have the time for one? What does that look like? Are you utilizing some time at the beginning of the year to focus on social emotional learning like we talked about on Tuesday? Are you building culture during that time? Could that be an opportunity to address some of these skills for students that haven't had access? Additionally, think about your most vulnerable students. Lacey on last Thursday talked to us during the keynote address about the increase in opportunity gaps that happens during times like this, and that we're already starting to see. We recommend considering these students first in your planning. Oftentimes they become an add-on. We've built our plan, now what do we need to add to support our most vulnerable students? Consider them first and make sure any action you take allows them to access what you're doing. Think about how you can provide guidance for built-in supports that exist within Zearn. There are a number of webinars. Ashley mentioned they're going to share a bunch of resources after the call. That will also include some webinars on different groups of students and built-in supports in the Zearn program that can help them. Also, if you're using Zearn or a program like it, think about how are you going to create student accounts? Is that happening at the district level? Is that happening at the school level? Is that happening at the teacher classroom level? Start to plan for these things so that you can have that in place before you jump in. Considerations around staffing. Think of a clear plan to support students so that you can use the teachers you have, but also allow them to maximize time in the summer for vertical planning that we talked about on Tuesday. If you're at one school, think about how you can partner with other schools within your district or other schools nearby to reduce the cost of teacher support. Also, think about how you might leverage teachers who've got experience with Zearn or that can get quickly up to speed on the curriculum. We only have a set amount of time during the summer to be able to support students with this work. And so think about how can you ramp up quickly to be able to give them the best support possible. Around communication. First, think about the communication tools that you currently use. Are they able to be leveraged to share information about your summer learning plan? What can you do and how can you utilize them? Additionally, think about the short survey or something like it to gather information to support access that we saw in the Greenbrier School District example. They also utilized an incentive program to get more students invested in this work and help them get from beginning to end of it. These are just a few of the considerations to think about. Many of you have dropped some into the chat box that we named, and I'm sure there are others you're continuing to think about. Each of your situations is unique. So these may be some of them, and there may be more. Spend some time thinking and plan out this action before you start to move forward with it. Now I'm going to hand it over to Corey, who's going to close us out by talking about what are the next steps that we can take as leaders in Nebraska to support our students with this work.
Great, thanks Brian, and thanks Ashley. One thing that a couple of thoughts I wanted to share. First of all, getting some questions about the cost of Zearn. So the curriculum materials for Zearn are actually available at no cost. There is the school license, which is $2,500 per site for an unlimited use of students, teachers, and administrators. Now, I think that's actually pretty cheap relative to what the cost of other instructional materials might actually come to be. So thinking also about how you might be able to leverage CARES Act funds to support summer learning in this, or how even title funds might be able to be utilized. I wanted to highlight Zearn because of the unique nature of actually addressing unfinished learning for mathematics via a digital platform. Recognize, many of the considerations that need to be made in that space, but I thought it was a good option as we think about where our kids might have been in March and how we supported them through the spring, and then what we might want to do over the summer. I would recommend checking out the distance learning link from Zearn, as well as some information about the summer learning recovery plans. I participated in the webinar yesterday that Zearn hosted that outlined the content for those grade levels. The other thing I think that is really super exciting about this is Zearn has also began to provide a modified scope and sequence for the fall. So as we think about what fall might look like and a move to perhaps some hybrid model, you don't have to do a ton of the work if you're using Zearn as your instructional materials. They've done that for you. I also quickly wanted to mention next, so one thing that we're going to do here in Nebraska is create a Zearn network. And so there are a couple different pieces to consider around a Zearn network. And if you can hit next, Brian, that would be great. Thank you. A couple of opportunities. First is a summer learning recovery network. So if you are interested in using Zearn for summer learning recovery for your school, we're going to create a group that would really be designed to help implement that over the course of the summer. Probably not kick off until early, maybe mid-June at the latest, to give folks a little bit of time to breathe. The other opportunity would be if you're thinking that this might be a good opportunity for the fall. So how you might support teachers utilizing Zearn math as a full or even a supplementary resource as well. I might mention that a lot of folks pair Zearn with Eureka Math. I know Kearney Public Schools is probably our district that has the most usage of Zearn in the state. Believe it or not, Zearn doesn't have much saturation in Nebraska yet, but I suspect we're going to start to see some more of that in terms of how they've structured summer learning and digital learning. If you think your school would be interested in perhaps participating in one of these networks, either for summer learning or fall implementation, shoot me an email and just say, you know, hey, we would be interested in summer learning recovery, and I think I may have 2 or 3 teachers. You might not want to do it for every grade level. You might want to identify those students that you think are going to need most support over the summer. So you might just have 1 teacher that would lead that. So shoot me a note if you are interested. More information, a lot of the building a plane while we're flying it, folks. A lot of the details are still to be determined in regards to what that looked like, but those networks would be free, provided by the state. If you're using Zearn, there's a possibility we might ask your school to purchase the school account. We don't know if we're going to have state funds for that. Some of that is to be determined as well. So maybe it would be a nice surprise if there was state funding for something like Zearn Math in this space, that you wouldn't have to do it. But I'll say that it's a pretty great opportunity. So let me know if you might be interested in participating in some type of a Zearn professional learning network. Yeah, just very excited about this possibility. As we start to wrap up, just previewing next week, boy, my math abilities were tested today, so we're going to switch to literacy next week and talk more about unfinished learning and literacy. And then on Thursday, talking about more specific resources that you might want to leverage in the summer space. And just a reminder that you can still sign up for the other webinars. After next week, we'll be halfway through and still would love more to participate. So I hope everyone enjoys their Monday. It's Memorial Day. If you would please, and you are able to, do just take a quick couple seconds to complete the feedback survey. I see that the link is there in the chat box. And otherwise, thanks for being here on a Thursday afternoon, and hope you have a great extended weekend, and stay safe. We'll see you next week.